Dr. William Madison was a skilled military surgeon. He was born in 1790 in Jasmine County, Kentucky, the son of Gabriel Madison and Miriam Lewis Madison. His father, Gabriel Madison, was a captain in the Revolutionary War under General George Washington from 1776 to 1783 and later in the Indian Wars. Dr. Madison attended and graduated from medical school in 1811 and in 1812 enlisted as a surgeon in the U.S. Army. During the War of 1812, he served as a surgeon on the staff of General Zachary Taylor. His medical education was put to good practice in treating the battle wounds of American soldiers during that war. During the war, Dr. Madison received $45 a month in salary, with an additional $4 a month for rations and forage for his horse. After the war, because of his skill as a surgeon, Dr. Madison was persuaded to remain in the military and would serve as a surgeon in several military forts in the Midwest. On December 16, 1819, he married Mary Lightfoot at Jefferson, Kentucky. But their time together was short, as in the summer of 1820, Dr. Madison received orders to report to his regiment, the 3rd U.S. Infantry at Fort Howard, located at Green Bay. Now we must remember that in 1820, what would become the state of Wisconsin was still part of the Michigan Territory, and Fort Howard was considered to be in the western frontier. Leaving his wife of only a short time, he reported for duty and took up his responsibilities of seeing to the health of the officers and men stationed at Fort Howard. Things went well for Dr. Madison until midwinter 1821, when he received word that his wife had given birth to a son, William Gabriel Madison. Also received in the communication was that his wife had passed away, possibly in the process of giving birth to their son. Dr. Madison applied for a furlough to return to Kentucky to check on the welfare of his son, but it took several months before the furlough finally came through. On May 10, 1821, Dr. Madison packed the belongings he would need for his journey to Kentucky. The following day, he mounted his horse in the early morning hours, accompanied by one soldier on foot who was carrying the fort's mail to Fort Dearborn in Chicago. For their route, they decided to take what is known as the Military Trail. For those not familiar with the Military Trail, it was a well-worn Indian trail that ran from Green Bay to Manitowoc Rapids and then on to Milwaukee. In later years, as the trail turned into a highway, it became known as Highway 141. Today, as it passes through Manitowoc, it is known as Rapids Road. As Dr. Madison and the accompanying soldier entered into what became Manitowoc County, they were joined by a young male Indian about 20 years of age. The Indian was carrying a musket, but did not appear to be hostile. While not able to speak English, he was able to communicate with hand gestures. By late afternoon on the second day of their travels, May 12th, they were about 3 miles north of Manitowoc Rapids and were about to cross into a small ravine with a wide creek running through it. At that point, the soldier went on ahead to check out the area. When he was out of sight, he heard a gunshot and quickly returned to the ravine, where he found Dr. Madison on the ground with a gunshot wound to his back. The soldier looked around, but the Indian was not in sight. Dr. Madison, who was badly injured, told the soldier to take his horse and return to Fort Howard for help. After telling his story at Fort Howard, several officers and men mounted horses and quickly returned to the site of the ambush. There they found that Dr. Madison had passed away from the wounds to his back. The group returned to Fort Howard with Madison's body, and the following day he was buried with full military honors. Days later, an officer and several soldiers traveled to Manitowoc Rapids, where they met with Chief Wamexico, the chief of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Menominee Indians in the area. Chief Wamexico was also known as Chief Mexico, Wampum, or John Y. Mexico. He was known to the soldiers as a man of integrity, someone they had trusted in the past. He was always upright in all his dealings with his white neighbors as well as his own people, highly respected and trusted by both. This is why the Army made contact with him before taking any action. They explained to him the situation, that one of his people had killed an Army officer, and he needed to find that person and turn him over to the military before they took action. Chief Mexico said he would do his best to find the killer and turn him over. It did not take long for the chief to find the killer. Word spread rapidly through the Indian villages in the area. He was told the killer was a young Chippewa brave named Ketaukah. The chief confronted the young brave, and Ketaukah readily admitted to killing, but could give no reason for doing so. Chief Mexico, along with several braves, took Ketaukah into custody and escorted him to Fort Howard, where he was turned over to the commander of the fort. Within days, Ketaukah was taken to Fort Shelby in Detroit, Michigan territory for trial. He would be kept in confinement until his trial. Ketaukah was not in confinement by himself. He shared a cell with another Indian named Kewabiscam of the Menominee tribe, who had been arrested for killing a French trapper in what would become Brown County, Wisconsin. Both men would be tried about the same time. Both trials took place in October 1821 before the Territorial Supreme Court of Detroit. In the trial, Ketaukah, who had to speak through an interpreter, had a very interesting defense. Although he freely admitted to murdering Dr. Madison, he claimed that the territorial court did not have the right to try him because of the Pike Treaty of 1805 and the 1807 Detroit Treaty, both signed by his people. The treaty clearly stated that his people were members of an independent Indian nation and retained exclusive jurisdiction of all offenses committed within their territory. In other words, if he was to be tried, it should be before members of the Chippewa tribe. The Territorial Supreme Court disagreed, stating that the treaty only involved crimes committed by a member of the Chippewa tribe against another member of the Chippewa tribe, and the killing of Dr. Madison was far outside the scope of the treaty. In the end, both Ketaukah and Kewabiscam were found guilty of their crimes and sentenced to death by hanging. Yet, both convicted men came close to getting away with their crimes. Shortly before their execution, Michigan Territorial Governor Lewis Case was encouraged to pardon both men on the basis of the 1807 treaty and to appease the Indian tribes in the Michigan Territory that he governed. Right up to the time of their execution, he seriously considered the pardon, but in the end, he decided their crimes were too great for a pardon. Now realizing their death was near, the two Indian braves were very anxious to obtain presents of tobacco, pipes, and other items, none of which they used themselves, but carefully laid them aside as an offering to the Great Spirit on the day of their death. They had converted a sort of drum by drawing a piece of leather over a jar that held their water, and frequently engaged in their solemn death dance, which they continued on the night before their execution and into the early morning hours. They had been given red paint, which they used to paint the walls on their cell with figures of men, reptiles, and animals. Around noon on the 27th day of December, they were escorted to their place of execution. Showed no fear as they walked along with their guards. At the place of execution, the ropes were placed around their necks, and they were quickly sent onward to their happy hunting grounds. Later that day, they were buried in unmarked graves in a wooded area outside Fort Shelby. Just a short footnote. Dr. Madison is believed to be buried at Fort Howard Memorial Park Cemetery, also called Fox Hill Cemetery, although no monument or gravestone can be found to mark his grave. Dr. Madison's only son, William Gilbert Madison, would only live for 2 years. He would pass away in 1823, just 2 years after the death of both his parents. I want to thank you for viewing my latest Manitowoc History Review video. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, thank you.